friends. My name is Kody Researcher, very, very sick. So I appreciate everybody who came on the stream and was very nice to me during that process. I'm feeling a lot better. And you might notice I'm back in the treasure state on the normal set and ready to talk about a number of cool things, including some cloud management, talking about how AWS manages some policies that are interesting to hackers and are the source of many of the breaches we've talked about on the news stream, and also talking about BlackHat, plus a little bit of preview for an upcoming Nullbyte episode. So having COVID has put me behind schedule on every single project I have, personal, professional, doesn't matter. I'm behind on everything. However, there's some really cool stuff coming out and I wanted to share it with you guys. And the first is this cool little Raspberry Pi build that I did a little bit before I was sick, and then I just finished it up over the last day. So this is the Raspberry Pi 5 that I'm going to be talking about, and it has a TFT touchscreen on it, and it's pretty cool. Like it goes in a case, it works well. I'm able to combine it with a keyboard, and this has been my little Raspberry Pi answer to the very cool cyber deck that I was showing off from the Hope conference. So I liked it, but there's also the ability to make it so you don't have to have it plugged in all the time. And this uninterruptible power supply module certainly is a bit big, but it allows me to sandwich them together in a way where I can get a Raspberry Pi running Kali Linux with this cute little TFT display and be able to actually use it while out and about. So we're going to make an episode about this and go into more depth. I'm trying to separate gently the TFT display. It's terrifying to do, is my only complaint about it. There we go. And now I can take the Raspberry Pi. I can connect it to the uninterruptible power supply. Demos are always a good idea while you're on the air. Okay, especially with two giant batteries. That makes me very nervous. And then I can add this screen if I'm lucky. Okay, so far the demo is going well. And then I can flip this switch and I get a mobile Raspberry Pi. So I've never had like a fully mobile Raspberry Pi, and I don't care about the fact that it is a complete brick. There's always ways of optimizing it. But the fact that this little thing will, given enough time, boot up into a Debian-based operating system in which I've installed, oh, there we go, in which I've installed all sorts of like cool like hacking programs. I'm pretty impressed by that. So even though it's a brick, I'm going to be featuring this in a future episode. I wanted to give you people who are here early a little bit of a preview on that. So hello, everyone. Stand by to see more about this Raspberry Pi portable hacking kit. And we're also going to talk about BlackHat coming up. So I'm going to be doing a live stream on Wednesday at BlackHat. If you are there, maybe stop by and say hello. It'd be cool to actually interview some people from the show or see if anybody wants to talk to us there. So it's going to be myself and Killian. I did a little bit of promotion earlier today on my LinkedIn. But yeah, look forward to seeing everybody at BlackHat. It's, oh my God, I'm going to be there streaming at this time next week, although probably a little earlier because we'll stick to the schedule more than we do. I kind of just do like 2 p.m. in whatever time zone I happen to be in. And I woke up in Pacific time today, so that's what we're doing. But we'll be streaming a little bit earlier when we are at BlackHat. Wow, that booted pretty fast. Yeah, and also I was complaining at first because I just plugged in the display and I was like, work, and it just didn't. You know, even the default Raspberry Pi image just didn't work. But it was, you know, one or two like git clone commands, kind of the standard Raspberry Pi stuff to get it working in one or two settings. So it was ultimately pretty easy to get this little setup working. And if you want something that's really cute and portable, then I have to say, cute, yes. Portable, it's chunky. Like it's kind of big, but there are other configurations that are smaller, and you can certainly just connect a power supply to it as well, like a little battery pack that would be smaller than that. So this is actually an uninterruptible power supply add-on for the Raspberry Pi. So its intention is to be plugged in, and then if it gets unplugged, it can stay on for a pretty long time. But I've just been running it as like a battery pack. Obviously, it might not be ideal for that, but it is still a pretty cool little Raspberry Pi kit. Also, hello to everybody in our audience that I recognize, Tai Kwong Gong and James Randolph. You might notice that we're off the air on Twitter, aka X now. So that is because as of our last stream, Twitter now charges for the privilege of streaming on their platform. So my 25,000 subscribers on Twitter cannot see it. So they are gone from us today, and that is truly unfortunate. I'm going to be cross-posting, making sure that links are posted so they can catch the stream on Security Forward. But yeah, 25,000 people stopped getting notifications today on the stream. And you know, I don't really want to reward that particular social media platform, especially right now. Like, it just doesn't seem like something I want to do. So, and there didn't seem like a tremendous amount of excitement over at Veronis for like, you know, like sponsoring like a paid version of an X account. So for now, anyway, I think it's going to be the case that we are no longer streaming on Twitter or X, whichever you want to call it. So that's pretty crazy because we've been doing that for years and years and years, and seeing that go away is very sad. But of course, like the fact that it's now a paid service kind of makes it limited what I can do. I, again, really don't want to pay for X. Like, for one, I get that stupid badge that like I genuinely don't want, and for two, you know, I just don't feel good about it. So sorry to everybody who is watching on Twitter. If you found your way to our other stream, then wonderful. We're going to be live on all of our other platforms, including Twitch, LinkedIn, and the original Security Forward channel. So yeah, cool. I've got that set up minus the battery pack. I just use a portable one. Yeah, most people will just rock like a high capacity battery pack. But this little keyboard, I guess, is the other piece of the kit that really stands out. It's got so many ways to connect like portable stuff. It can do Bluetooth. It can do like 2.4 gigahertz with a little USB candy that like plugs into the other Raspberry Pi here. So yeah, there's some cool optimization I'll be going over with that setup in the future. What watch do I wear? That's an interesting question. So at the moment, I'm using a normal regular Casio that was like $70 on Amazon. I used to have a fancier one that had Bluetooth, and it promised a 2-year battery life, and it lasted exactly 1 year. So I've never had a smartwatch, and I've seen other people with them. I just don't need that many notifications, and they don't do anything I particularly like really want right now, except as a microcontroller platform. I'm not that interested in them. I have kind of like the standard like old school like Casio watch also that I have as a backup anytime this one breaks. But in general, I usually have a watch until the battery dies, and then I'm not very good at swapping out the battery. So I've managed to let moisture in and watch it slowly destroy the screen over the course of several days. So this particular model, I cannot read, and I will try to find for you. However, it's just like a low-key, like not large Casio, like G-Shock like style watch. I used to have like the very like rugged like military one, and I found it caught on everything and hit things, and was actually quite annoying for other people and objects. But it was fine. It was like having like natural armor, so I don't really mind those either. Let's see. All right. So another thing I wanted to go over today, as we've still got plenty of time on the stream, is permissions in AWS. So, okay, I want to preface this as to why a hacker would care about this. And it's because like we constantly see these like data breaches or all this juicy data or customer information that gets accidentally leaked. And sometimes it's like, oh, a threat actor, you know, like exposed this information. But most of the time it's like somebody at that company created a policy or like didn't quite understand the implications of what they were doing when setting up a new service, and ended up like doing like something that's like risky, like leaving it open for anybody to access once they know what API to call. So that's like the number one source of data breaches that I see nowadays, honestly. And I wanted to go through a little bit about what it means, like some of the terminology, and why there's a whole specialized like field of people that work in AWS stuff, and how it's different from like Azure and like some of the other services that you might have heard of. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share my actual Amazon account here. And this is the Identity and Access Management panel. So when people make mistakes that hackers are interested in, it is generally in relation to the policies created in the Identity and Access Management system. So I just want to say, if you are getting started with AWS stuff, the official Amazon guides for this look like they were written by Jeff Bezos, like up late at night, just drinking cups of coffee, just typing huge blocks of text with no images whatsoever. Let me give you an example. What is IAM? AWS Identity and Access Management is a web service that helps you securely control access to AWS resources. Look at like no photos, no examples, just huge blocks of text. Like as a writer, I'm just like break this up. Like why is this assails the eyes? So that's just Amazon style, you know, like if you don't like reading huge blocks of unbroken text, then like you maybe, you know, like are not going to love all of Amazon's documentation because it's what they like. They enjoy it. But I'm curious if anybody in the audience has experience with AWS in particular and knows what I'm kind of talking about with these policies. So the policies themselves will look like, so I did find some decent guides and I want to shout them out also. But in particular, not that one. In particular, I want to show like what one of these policies actually looks like. Yeah, so like this is what the core kind of thing that we're gonna talk about a little bit looks like in actual fact. It is a policy that allows or disallows something explicitly in relation to a specific like entity, like a AWS account, an S3 bucket, or like some other Amazon nonsense term that just refers to like a database or like a running virtual machine that might need to access it. So let's see, due to a misconfiguration. Yes, I have heard that a lot. Yeah, so this is where the misconfiguration would live. Like if you have like a AWS like assumed IAM role or IAM policy that has risky elements to it, which I'm trying to find another one. Okay, here's another one. Then, you know, this is where somebody who set a policy and wants to make sure that one instance can connect to another, or like something is able to write logs to like a log collection like bucket. Like these are all things that are defined by these policies and made possible by, you know, like relationships of trust. And those are complicated to visualize and confusing for beginners. So that's why it's kind of, when you're first getting into hacking, like you'll hear about these big breaches and you will start to understand that, okay, like there's a lot of mistakes being made out there and a lot of like hackers that are, you know, getting great bug bounties and like making like really like earth shattering news when they find these breaches are doing it because they're just able to pick up on where people have made mistakes in setting up these policies. So like these policies like are pretty straightforward, like JSON, like they are relatively easy to read, which is why I like the way that they're laid out. But they can be applied to either individual users or groups of users or roles, which are kind of like in between. It's like something that, for example, a virtual machine could like assume a role, perform an action with a certain policy, and then go back to doing whatever it's doing and give up that role and not have to have those perhaps elevated or dangerous permissions when it's not actively doing something it's supposed to do. So there's some good explanations here, and then there's some bad explanations here. And I think some of the better ones are on AWS posts. So there are some blogs that have been put out by Amazon that are notably better in a one-to-one comparison for like visual aids and examples. So I have to shout out some of these blogs. If you're interested in digging into this stuff, there's a lot of great explanations that are on Amazon's blogs, perhaps not in their direct documentation, which unfortunately come up first when you start looking up these problems. So as I said, we have users. Those are like obviously like either human users or maybe like a piece of code that's operating as a user. And then there's roles. So that's an identity that is temporary, but it can be taken on by not necessarily a single person. It can be anybody who needs it. And then we have groups, and groups are like groups of users. And the reason for groups is generally like, I guess in AWS, you used to have to write these like ridiculous like permissions statements for like every individual user, and you couldn't really reuse them. And it was just like a very complicated and annoying process to do. So by having groups, and in my dashboard, you can see I have user groups, computer abusers, and computer users. Then I can make it so that I can set policies for these groups, and I can basically reuse those policies and make them like very simple and very explicit, and generally kind of sort different groups as I need to. So that's kind of key to the reusability of this concept. Oops, not that one. and policies are where people then make mistakes. I mean, in other areas, maybe they're like adding unnecessary users to something, or they're adding external like users to a group. But policies are kind of where things can go wrong based on what you say is going to happen here. So one thing to note that I think is useful is that AWS by default denies stuff. So like, or IAM policies like explicitly deny things if there isn't permission given. So if you don't, give someone permission to access something or perform an action on that object, then they can't do anything. And that's great because by default, it's just going to deny it. And it also means that deny will always trump an allow. So if you write a policy that has like, allow this like S3 bucket to be accessed by this user, then you can also say, write a policy that says to deny access to that user as well. And even though both of those policies are listed, the deny policy will always come out on top. So that makes it so you can be pretty granular about, maybe writing like a big policy that says you can do all this stuff except this one user or something like that. And then the deny is the one that is counted most strongly, I guess, or like overrides an allow. So those are some things that like people think about when they're creating these policies. And this is what an actual policy looks like. You have the action, which is the get object action. This is the SSID or SII. No, sorry, I don't know what this is, but it's the allow get object. I'm guessing this is the tag for the action name. Effect is allow, and this could also be deny. And then it links to a specific resource, and the asterisk implies basically everything in here. So if you were to just put an asterisk and that's all, it would just be like everything, which is what you don't want. And this is where, like, if you were looking for a risky policy, these stray asterisks or like giving too much permission is exactly where that automatic like misconfiguration like happens. Oh, good. Okay, so James can confirm that he hates the AWS documentation. Yes, inscrutable, designed to intimidate. I have lots of notes on how I feel about like, look at this. Like, come on. Like, technically everything is listed, but can we get like one photo or like a visual representation for this inscrutable technology they made up? Like, come on. But anyway, it is relevant and it is interesting. I wanted to go over a little bit today. So now that I've introduced some of these concepts, which James can confirm is difficult to understand via their documentation, I want to actually show how this works. So this is, if you create an AWS account, then this is the identity and access management panel. And it'll give you information about what you got going on. And for me, anyway, it's going to warn me that I need multi-factor authentication for my root user, which I thought I already set up, but I guess I didn't. So it'll give you security alerts, obviously, and give you kind of like a general rundown of how things are being accessed. That's good. Like it lets you see if you've misconfigured something, which I clearly have with this giant glowing one. But anyway, so we have a breakdown of all the IAM resources. So that's going to be user groups, users, roles, policies, and identity providers. That's going to be like more external stuff. Like if I wanted to connect like Google Drive or something and have it be able to write to or access an AWS bucket or S3 bucket, then it could do that. So let me show off kind of how this can be divided. So we have individual users, and in this case, I have Buck, Carl, and Ramsey, and each one of them has been assigned a group. But I guess in the olden days of AWS, they went through and they would give like each employee or whatever, or each, like program or running virtual machine its own individual policy, which sucks. So like, we don't want to do that. And instead we have policies that we can apply to them via the groups that they're in. So, all right, so I have my individual users. I haven't gone through and applied individual policies to them or put them in groups. But, now you can see that I actually have at some point. But when they were created, they were just here kind of floating, waiting to be assigned to a group. So then I assigned groups. So I have, in this case, computer abusers and computer users. And I have 2 users in the users. And then I also have 1 abuser. So I can see which users are here. I can assign then policies specifically to these users, knowing that, they should be allowed to do stuff. And I can also add additional users if I want to do that here. So I can see permissions. They've been given CloudWatch logs functionality, so they're able to see. Oh, it spells it out. So this is one of the like managed policies that AWS supplies, or Amazon like supplies. And it's basically like a boilerplate policy, and you can see the JSON here, like for what it's actually saying. And it's saying that it's allowing full access to CloudWatch logs. And then the resource is that asterisk that we were talking about. So this basically means these users have like a large amount of permissions, and being able to like look at these raw policies or write them, I guess, is like what Amazon security people do all day. It is apparently something that is a great source of problems and granularity. And once you learn how to write them, then like you're excellent. But until that point, it can be a problem figuring out why something does or doesn't have permission when it should or shouldn't. And this is where it all comes down to that with AWS resources. So there's a lot of different things that can be affected by this. It could be what virtual machine can access what information on a virtual drive. It can be connecting a third-party service or a user to information stored in logs or on a drive. But this is kind of the beating heart of Amazon's authentication, and where all of the really interesting misconfigurations that expose lots of log files or other sorts of diagnostic information can be made. So hackers would discover this in a number of ways. Like if, for example, you had a role that was way too open, like a public role, where people could like list files or maybe write to something that they weren't supposed to, then hackers would basically go through and try all the different actions in the API and see if they could match any of these to weak permissions. And if they were able to, for example, find something really juicy that they wanted to like scrape out of a particular database, then some of the permissions in this might allow them to have everything they need to access that resource and be able to scrape everything and download the entire thing. So yeah, that's just my little introduction to like permissions. You can see that there are a couple more tabs here. We have like roles, and as we described before, like roles might be something that's like taken on temporarily with credentials that are valid for like a short duration of time, but don't actually allow you long-term access. So let's say that I only want like a user or like an external resource to be able to do something while it's in the process of uploading a log or something like that. Sorry. This is a way that you could set like very granular permissions and also just make it less likely that a rogue user account is able to do something that it's not supposed to do. There's a conversation going on about why James hates AWS docs. Let's see. There's so much there, and I'm a beginner in AWS. Lots of stuff isn't clear to me. Yes. So I would say the hardest thing about learning this for me was learning what like a S3 bucket is, or what like a EC2, or like some of these other like Amazon products that are just like obscure acronyms that don't make a lot of sense unless you work in this field. You kind of have to get used to them first before you start understanding what is going on. Because you can have a user, but it's going to be accessing something. Is it going to be a virtual machine? Is it going to be like a bucket of information or a bunch of logs or logistics or like a dashboard? Like there's so many things that could be strung together here, and it's so complicated. It's kind of impossible to get to know where to get started first. And I guess that was the hardest thing in learning about these permissions and trying to apply some to, like virtual users. Most of the time, we're just using policies that are already written by Amazon and supplied, and you can go through and find them and like lightly edit them or just use them as is. But generally, using a managed policy, and there's like, I think like 13,000 of them, like just there's a whole absolute ton of them that can be used to string together various entities and perform specific actions on them. That is the way that most of these policies are created, and making mistakes with that or being too open with those policies is how hackers are able to get in and start doing interesting stuff. So, okay, here's a question. Does creating an admin group, then adding a user to said admin group, give the admin the user admin privileges? Yes. In this case, if we created a group that had administrative privileges and then we took a user and we added them to that group, then that user would get administrative privileges. And that's nice because previously we would have had to change that individual user's permissions and write a new policy explicitly for them. SAQ, I want to sleep. Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. My flight was at 7 in the morning. And I woke up at 4:30 today. So I will have a nice night of sleep when I am done today. All right, so that's most of what I wanted to talk about for identity and access management. If you have any questions, it's something that I've been learning about over the last couple of weeks. It's something that, again, is a little inscrutable at first, just because of the way that AWS makes their documentation so incredibly dense. I found it to be a little more difficult to read than I expected. But as I said, there are some good resources. So some of the different resources that I found that I liked, one of them was Spacelift. Is that what this is? Spacelift.io. This was a good blog. It had great like visuals, and it made it easy for me to kind of understand some of the terminology that was being discussed. It's so hard to imagine all this stuff in your head the first time. It really does help to have it broken down into a couple examples that I think were simple and good. Another one was, as I said before, blog.awsfundamentals.com. I found several different resources on these concepts that made a lot of sense and had great like visual examples of how things worked. Some of them are these weird, I don't know. Some of them are a little weird, like in the way that they're drawn, but I don't care. I'll take any visual over just, this. So I have to say, if you're looking for some good guides, then those would be my two sources. And of course, there's also some great videos out there covering these topics. So yeah, if you've got any questions, please let me know. And I'm going to move on to some of the other questions. So one question was, any news about the ESP32 and WPA3? No. Thank you for reminding me, though. Am I holding one right now? No, I'm not. Dang. I was going to say, maybe we'll just try flashing one right now. So again, this is something that is supposedly supported. So being able to create a device that connects to a WPA3 network, both ends, like the client and then also the access point, that should be possible based on the documentation that I've seen. I just have not had a chance to do it since I've been out. I'm like digging around trying to find if we actually have any of those microcontrollers here, but I think perhaps not. Sorry about that. I know that you would like a WPA3 demo. The good news is that I've got Wireshark working on my little Raspberry Pi setup, and I've also got some good wireless network adapters that support monitor mode. So if we want to show off what a WPA3 handshake looks like and kind of dig around and explore it, that's actually doable now. I can connect this thing to an HDMI out, and we can have it on the stream as a second computer. I'll just have to write a filter so I don't expose my exact location for like the millionth time. All right. So I also have, oh, cool. Yeah, cloud is on my list of things to learn. Yeah, for me, the best resources I've had for learning cloud security have been like Portswigger's Academy. They had some really, really great courses and live labs that you could use. The only problem is they go down like somewhat often, not like a ton, but somewhat. So there were times when I wanted to use them for demonstrations and the labs were just down because people were just attacking them. So because of that, I have made my own in some instances. But Portswigger Academy was really cool for being able to just like run against some active cloud resources and just see what kind of attacks you can and kind of pull off. The next level to that is understanding cloud infrastructure. So if you understand the way that these like policies are written, you understand like what each part of this means, and you can like read through like all the different like JSON examples and like identify like a vulnerable policy, for example. Like that is a new level of understanding how this cloud stuff works, and will open up certain jobs like security jobs where like maybe you're like monitoring permissions, creating permissions, or understanding permissions for like all these things that are trying to be connected together. So here we go. So I really do like these JSON examples. I think they're super readable, and I think that it lets you see the foundation of what policy is, the resource that's being accessed, the action that we're allowing, and then the effect, which is in this case allow. So yeah, I enjoyed learning about this. I thought it was unusual, and at first it was inscrutable and time consuming because frankly, if you don't know what all of these entities that it's talking about are, you have to stop and go and look them up. I like kind of identify what it's for, like show a couple like examples of it working, and then you can understand this overlying like security architecture stuff. So that's my little demo to IAM from a beginner's perspective. And anybody who wants to can try out making these permissions themselves, see what they look like, and see maybe how easy it is to make mistakes with it. So I imagine I'll be talking more about this, but I'm going to have other cloud security topics that are brought onto the Wednesday stream. So if you like this, we'll have more examples, and some of them will be more hands-on. So if you want to grab an AWS account and just, just don't charge anything to it, I'll be making some other examples that you can actually follow along on. All right. Good morning, ethical hackers. Where is it morning? But yes, I agree. I wish I was waking up around right now. I feel like I could use about a year of sleep after last week, but I am feeling a lot better. Let's see. Okay. Kody, most of your videos, you show how we can capture a four-way handshake, but cracking it is expensive, can be. Is there a free service or something like it we can use? Or what would you use? That's a very interesting question. So back in the day, I'm sure it's still not up and running now. There was a distributed hash cracking service where basically it was a group of researchers who wanted to get access to like a massive library of handshakes, basically. So they just wanted the raw handshake data to do like entropy analysis and like kind of like examine the key that like generated these and try to like identify interesting patterns. But the effect is, if you were to upload a handshake to this distributed hash cracking service, it would then distribute it to lots of different worker computers and effectively crack the hash through distributed computing. So I'm sure that service still doesn't exist. But back in the day, if you didn't have access to your own strong computer to do the hash cracking, then it certainly helped to be part of, research projects that were studying the entropy of keys and needed large groups of handshakes. So the trade-off is like you give them a bunch of handshakes, they give you whichever passwords are easiest to crack. And they basically just run like rainbow tables and some of the other very basic like RockU word lists on it. But they just have a bunch of worker computers all distributed doing the work. And I'm sure those worker computers are perfectly aware of what they're doing and have permission to be doing that on that individual device. I believe, anyway. But yeah, so there are some research experiments that are studying entropy in keys that will actually crack passwords for you in some cases. But a lot of them have been shut down for unforeseeable reasons. Cloud server. Yeah, so another way of doing this is obviously just spinning up your own cloud server. So if you were, let's say that you have a handshake that you wanted to like crack and you had like a Raspberry Pi. So like you're able to get the handshake, but cracking it is going to be a little bit more complicated. Well, one way that you could do that is just spin up a virtual machine that has a really powerful GPU and set it to work cracking. Now, of course, mining for cryptocurrency has become the general thing to do anytime someone has access to a low cost setup like that. And that's kind of made this a little bit more difficult to do. But as James points out, they are pretty generous with trial accounts on Linode, although they wouldn't let me create an account at first because I said I was a security researcher, and they're like, we're not giving you an account until we know what you are trying to do with it. And I was like, I'm just gonna demo stuff, like nothing crazy. I'm not scanning the internet or doing anything wild. And they were nice about it. But yeah, initially just saying that I was a security researcher was enough to make them refuse to open my account. So maybe don't mention it if you are an ethical hacker. It might actually complicate your registration process. So one question is, in using the security lists word list, how do you select the right one? Well, it's usually appropriate to factor in like whatever individual thing you're cracking. So let's say that it's like WPA. Like a WPA handshake has a minimum of 8 characters. Like it can't be shorter than that. So like having a password list that includes any characters that are shorter than 8 characters is a complete waste of time. So because of that, there's password lists within that have been specifically compiled for things like SSH logins or like Wi-Fi password cracking, and making sure you're going with the password list that's already formatted for whatever individual thing you're trying to crack is really important, because you're going to waste a ton of time with way too short passwords if you're using like an SSH login password list to try to crack like a WPA like 2 handshake. It's not gonna work. Like almost all the passwords on that list are gonna be shorter than 8 characters, and as a result, it's not gonna be very effective. So that would be my advice in like selecting them. Obviously, like a bigger password list is better, but not if it includes a bunch of passwords that are impossible for it to actually work. Nice jacket, thank you. So apparently there was a camp I didn't get to go to, EMF camp, where it was mandatory to wear like high vis in order to be at the camp. And then immediately after, a bunch of people from there went to a camp I did get to go to, tour camp. And I already had this from a Goodwill, and they thought I was very cool and had maybe been to that other camp. So I've just been wearing it because I like LARPing as being from this camp that I've never been to. But it is a nice coat, I have to say. I like it a lot. You will be able to find me around the conferences coming up. So speaking of conferences coming up, DEF CON is coming up after BlackHat, and it's going to be like I live in Las Vegas, because I'm going to be there for like a solid week and a half. It's going to be crazy. So we're going to have our little clown show over at the Circus, and it's going to be fun. Not the Circus, but the conference itself, because it's happening in the convention center for the first time. The rules are totally different, and I've heard that it's going to be a little chaotic. So there's going to be a lot more space than before, but at the same time, like it's going to be interesting having a hacking conference that's being held at a place that hasn't held that particular kind of rambunctious conference before. So yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. But we are going to be kind of embedded with IoT Village, just like we did at Hope. We're going to be having our own village again. So mini village again. So we're going to have our own area with classes and cool stuff to do. So you can come by and check us out in IoT Village. Where they are specifically, I probably should know, because apparently the convention center is massive and easy to get lost in. So I will follow up with some updates about where specifically IoT Village is going to be, but we will be there. So if you look on the DEF CON website and look for IoT Village, you should see where we are going to be set up for the conference. I will be wearing a mask this time because I do not ever want to be that sick again ever in my life. But you will probably see me by my high vis and then brightly colored masks, of which I just bought 100. All right, so I think that I am going to probably call the stream pretty soon, seeing as I am holding off coughs only by sheer will. Yeah, I'd go to BlackHat if I could afford it. You're telling me. Like the actual cost of BlackHat is, like a little high for some people. I used to go to BlackHat by applying as press, and I would show up as a journalist. And that was sometimes difficult. I had to show them a lot of evidence that I was who I said I was and that I was contributing to the community. But I do like being press at BlackHat, and I remember to do it too late every single year. So yeah, I might get press creds at BlackHat. It's not a bad idea. But it certainly is an expensive conference to attend if you are not press. And I had to make my own YouTube channel to qualify to go to that conference as press. So I completely understand. Every time that I've been to BlackHat, I have not paid for it because I could not afford it. I have always shown up as press, I think almost every year, with maybe 1 or 2 years that I showed up as part of like Veronis's booth staff. So speaking of, a big shout out to Veronis again for not only sending me to the Hope Conference, where I unfortunately got sick, but have been allowed to recover and rest up, but also for sending me to DEF CON. So I'm going to be at BlackHat, of course, but also I'm going where only the other Veronis security researchers dare tread, and I will be at DEF CON doing a lot of really fun stuff. So last year I got to be a goon for the press area, and this year they're all good on goons. So instead I will be 100% teaching classes, hanging out with people, and meeting up with people from the stream. All right, so that's about everything we have for today. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the stream. It's the first time I'm really back since being sick, and it's nice to talk to everyone in what is this last little glimpse of the normal world before I'm back to back in conferences again. So it's gonna be cool if I see you in the next couple of weeks, either at BlackHat or DEF CON. Please say hello. It's always great to meet people from the stream. And I met a lot of really awesome people who watch the Nullbyte channel and also Security Forward, including a bunch of Varonis customers, which was really cool. So, all right, everyone. Big shout out to Varonis for keeping the stream on even while I've been sick. If you want to help out, you can always go to varonis.com/Kody. That's Kody. Lets everyone know that you appreciate the stream and we should keep doing it every week. And I will be on with Killian this Friday for our final Know Before You Go, what to check out at BlackHat stream. So we're going to be doing the normal news as well, but we'll also break out some things that you should know about the upcoming BlackHat conference, things you should check out, things at the arsenal that look really cool. So that's going to be new hacking tools that have come out. We'll have a bunch of recommendations for you. So stay tuned for the stream on Friday, and I will see all of you then. Goodbye, everyone.